People always say that you have to have money to make money, and that there's an extraordinary level of sacrifice on the road to success. So how is it that investors like us, who didn't start out with much money and who don't rely on banks and credit, how is it that we can increase our income and build our wealth in a way that doesn't require us replacing one full-time job with another while still enjoying the things in life that matter most to us? That has always been the big question, and this podcast reveals the answers. I am Carrie Lake, and this is the Investor Warrior. Hey, y'all, and welcome to the Investor Warrior. You have probably gotten a few notifications from us saying that we're going live, and we had a few technological challenges this morning. Just a few, but we are here. We are live now, so super excited because I have Matt Atkinson on you're from Utah, correct?
Born and raised. I am from my mom, but I was born in Utah.
Nice. So the first time I went out to Utah was the first time I went skiing, and the skiing in Utah, like if you're a good skier and you know how to ski, is amazing. But when you're first starting out, it was terrifying.
Wow. Well, you have one thing up on me. I'm originally from Utah and lived here for most of my life. I've actually never gone skiing before.
Stop it. What?
No skiing, no snowboarding. It's cold outside. So I never gone before. You.
Wow. Well, that is an interesting fact. So you're from Utah, you don't ski.
From Utah, I don't ski or snowboard.
Wow. All right. So you guys, today I wanted to bring Matt on. We actually met at a Tony Robbins event, and I'm going to let Matt introduce himself before we go into what we want to talk about today, which is subject twos, and why I think that subject twos are going to be an excellent opportunity and an excellent strategy for the year 2021, given the events that have gone on since February of 2020, March of 2020. So Matt, go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell your Investor Warrior journey of how you got started.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your live podcast. I'm excited to share a little bit about myself. Originally from Utah. I come from a bi-cultural family. My mom is a Hispanic. My dad's a super white guy, like the screen behind me. So I come from a Latin, Caucasian background. And I think that's a really important part of who I am because it shows some diversity here in Utah. My mom actually passed away on my birthday, August 2nd of last year, and has been a very good reflection of what's important. And I think if I shared this example last year, it would be a lot different than now. And I'll give some different ideas of the importance of like living through real estate investing. So I've been a mortgage lender since the end of 2001. At the young age of 23, I was going to college, and I learned that you could make like $6,000 or $8,000 a month doing 3 or 4 loans, which is amazing, versus like serving at Chili's, which I still love Chili's, and making like $1,500 a month while I was in college. So I started a mortgage lender at the end of 2001, so going on 20 years now. And I was full commissioned. And I think that's really important for you guys to understand. Like, I've always, not by choice, but I've always like done the full commission job. You reap what you sow. If you don't bring anything, you don't eat. And that's always really motivated me. So after getting into mortgages for a couple years, in 2003, I'm like most young guys, I bought a BMW and a motorcycle, and I didn't own a house. And then I read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, like literally the month after. And I was like, holy cow, I need to be way better with my money. Even though I was really good with my money, I need to be better with my money. I don't want to drive an old Oldsmobile, but I just need to continue to save. So after that, I bought my first house in 2004. I bought a couple rentals in 2005. I actually bought a rental from an internet lead. Internet leads back then were like $50 per lead. They were really, really expensive. And we actually bought her house as a short sell because she had what's called a 228 subprime loan, which means it was fixed for 2 years and then it would adjust, and it had a prepayment penalty. It was probably the worst loans to get at the time. And I ended up buying her house because she couldn't refinance. And then it was like the addiction, right? Like real estate deals. I bought 13 houses in 2006. So as the upside of the market here in Utah. And as a national lender, I was helping people in California, Florida, Nevada, and Arizona, amongst other parts of the country, buy a bunch of real estate. So I learned quickly about different investment strategies. A lot of times people would put like new construction under contract, flip the contract to an end investor. That no one does that now because the builders all got upset during the last correction. But like just able to learn, option arms were super popular. You get like an interest only loan that was attached to an index, and then you had like 4 different payment options. A negative amortized loan, that means you're paying less than interest only. An interest only loan, a 30-year amortization, and a 15-year amortization, and no one paid the 15 because they couldn't afford it. So as I helped a bunch of people do these option arm loans all throughout the country, I saw that different parts of the country hit their peak first. Like Florida, Carrie, that's where you live now, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so Florida hit their peak like 18 months before Utah did. Florida, Arizona, Nevada, California all started going down. And then in 2008, as the economic crisis of Lehman Brothers and all those big banks started going out of business, those banks were the ones we would sell mortgages to, like mortgage-backed security. So I was in the industry as the market was going down, both financially and real estate related. I stomached through it. I started buying people's houses with seller financing, all-inclusive deeds of trust, wraps, some states call them, notes and deeds, subject to. And it's crazy. The best deal I got, I'll share the best deal later, but like you literally would just buy other people's houses because they didn't want to make the payment anymore, or they were unfortunately behind. And during the downturn of the market, I started fixing and flipping houses. So I learned how to flip houses when the market was going down. So you had to learn very quickly on like what adjustments to make, how to not over improve. You have hard money, how to move your properties quickly. And then I started buying more seller finance properties because I already had 10 mortgages in my name. Yeah. So now I have 95 rental properties here in Utah, a mix between single family residencies and an eightplex. Last year I sold 7 of them because I want more capital, because I think capital is important, right, with what we're experiencing. And I love helping people with real estate investing. It's an amazing way to increase and enhance your life. And I appreciate you allowing me to jump on this virtual podcast so then we can help other people throughout the country be able to do what you're doing and what I'm doing. When I started, I was 23. I did not, I don't like saying the sob story, but like I didn't finish college. I'm 2 science classes short from an associate's in business. So like I literally was working at Chili's, like hustling, really good, really persistent, and then started doing mortgages, then started investing in real estate. And it's been very, very beneficial today.
Nice. I also worked at Chili's for.
Yeah.
I was into their chips and queso, man.
You're a chili head. That's awesome. What's your favorite entree in addition to chips and queso at Chili's?
Oh, wow. Probably their spinach dip. I'm a sucker for dips,
Yeah, gotcha. So I love their mambo combo or triple plate, depending on where it was, right? And you can substitute. Yeah, you can get like the Southwestern egg rolls and crispers, and then I would change something else for like mozzarella sticks if I remember correctly.
I lived off of Chili's. At the end of my shift, I would get the blondie brownie or the molten cake, and that would be my dinner.
Yeah, I love molten chocolate cakes. Yeah. A molten chocolate cake is a Swiss chocolate sponge with some fudge in the middle with vanilla ice cream, drizzle the caramel and hot fudge, and it's amazing. Like that's how I would upsell. It's like only $5.99.
Yeah, it really is heaven on a plate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, I'm so excited to know a fellow chili head.
Yes.
So I'm super excited to talk to you about kind of what's going on in the market today. I think that there's a huge opportunity to buy more houses subject to the existing financing. And let's just kind of talk about that for the newbies real quick, what subject to is. I'll go ahead and have you explain it and I can add to it.
Sure. So I would say there's two primary ways to buy people's houses that have underlying mortgages. Number one is you can do an all-inclusive deed of trust or a wrap mortgage. Basically, the difference is each state's going to be a little different, but the philosophy is the same. You're going to want to get a copy of their mortgage note to see what, if as long as they're current, they're going to, ideally, there's normally a spread between that, like what they're paying and what they're going to sell you the house for. I personally would suggest that you always use a third-party escrow company for the difference, because heaven forbid that they're getting the money and they're not making their mortgage payment. That happened a lot during the last downturn of the market. So that's really common, an all-inclusive deed of trust or a wrap. A subject to is you're going to have less documentation. You're going to buy it subject to the existing property. So like normally they're going to deed you the house in lieu of the property, and then you're going to take on that monthly obligation. I do want to share this. There's 5 things I think you should get on every mortgage when you're buying it with subject to, and I'll share that with you right now. Number 1 is a copy of the current mortgage note. You'll notice that some people are doing loan forbearances, so they're going to have forbearance paperwork that payment is get thrown on the back end of the loan. It is critical that you know that information. Most of the time people really don't understand what they're doing or signing. So you need to know what the current balance is from the note or what the original terms were. And then if they have a loan modification or a forbearance, you need to get that document. Number 2 is you need to get the current mortgage statement. The current mortgage statement will show if they have taxes and insurance included, if they're current or behind, and how many months they're behind if they are. Another thing the mortgage statement will show is if they are behind and they've already had a notice of default. In my experience, normally you're not going to get mortgage notes or mortgage statements any longer, because that loan is now in the pre-foreclosure department of that lender. So if you do buy a property subject to, you can get what's called a reinstatement. The reinstatement will help you show how much money you owe, so then you can bring that property current. So that's number 2. Number 3, I'd always encourage you to get a copy of the current homeowner's insurance declarations page, because you might want to change that coverage from an owner occupied to an investor property. You might want to get added to that insurance. Everyone has their own philosophies with that, which is important, but you want to make sure you understand what the insurance is. I've personally had 3 fires in my rentals. So I've had 3 fire claims in my career, and I've had 5 water claims. So like the water claims, it was more than $5,000. I didn't want to pay it out of my pocket. My kind of rule of thumb is I have a $1,000 deductible across the board on all insurance. And normally if it's going to cost more than $4,000 to $5,000, I'm just going to pay it out of my pocket, because I don't want all my premiums to go up the next year, because that normally stays on for about 3 years. So you got to take that into consideration. Number 4, so we have the mortgage note, we have the mortgage statement or reinstatement, we have the insurance. Okay, next one. You want to get a signed borrower's authorization letter for the seller, so that if the loan is sold to someone else, that you can communicate with them in addition to their username and passwords, so you can make online payments if you need it. A nice comfortable thing in today's market is I want the sellers to feel comfortable that they can go and look anytime they want in case they need to go verify something, they're going to go buy a new house or etc. I've probably had about 13 or 14 clients in the past that I have bought their homes, and then they've bought homes in the future or refinanced their existing house. I'm always good to communicate with their mortgage professional if they live in Utah or another state, because I want to be as easy to work with so they can help move on with their transaction. The last thing that you'll want to get is an executed power of attorney specific only to that property. And the reason that you want a power of attorney specific to that property is, heaven forbid the loan is sold and you don't have the username and password any longer, and they require a new borrower's authorization letter that's dated within the last year. These are all these things I've learned in the last 15 years, 14 years as I bought seller financing. So maybe I'll send this information to Carrie if that's okay, and then she can post it however she wants to after that, because the mechanics of subject to or seller financing is important, but you also need to understand the documents, because you can go in and get super excited to go buy a house, but then you don't know what documentation. A title company is not, or a lawyer is not normally going to tell you, here's a checklist of what you need. So this is a great resource that you can be familiar with. And if you are not familiar with these documents, if you own your own home, it might be really good for you to be familiar with what these documents are and read them, because, there's a gentleman named Peter Fortunato. Carrie, are you familiar with Peter Fortunato?
Yep.
Cool. Peter Fortunato lives in the Tampa, St. Pete area, and he says, most people are civilians, right? They're civilians. They're not professionals. They're real estate investors. They don't know any better. So what we're trying to help you guys do is become professionals, so then you can have a better experience during this current economic opportunity.
Yeah, cool. I love those the five items that you provided. And I just wanted to add a couple of things too. Number one, I run my life with checklists, especially when I'm doing these kinds of transactions, because I've done lots and lots of subject to transactions, but I forget sometimes. We get busy. I'm constantly referring to my checklist, especially with owner financing and subject to transactions where the paperwork is a little bit more involved, just to make sure at closing we have all of the paperwork in place. Because as you know, Matt, if you don't get something signed like a power of attorney at closing, it might be difficult for you to go back to the seller. At that point, they are not obligated to sign a power of attorney. And that power of attorney is really, really important. And now, like what Matt said, it's limited. It's a limited power of attorney. So it's really only specific to the house. If you were to have a fire at that house and there was an insurance claim and you don't have a power of attorney, well, you're out of luck. Now you're coming out of pocket because you cannot sign that insurance claim over to yourself. You cannot put in the claim in. The power of attorney is so, so important. And one of the very first deals I did, Matt, at a partner, and she forgot to get the power of attorney, and I was just doing all my other deals. And we realized after closing, we didn't have a power of attorney. And thank God she went back to the seller and she got the power of attorney, but I was sweating. I'm like, we didn't get a power of attorney? Like, that's a big deal. Now, we were flipping the house. We weren't keeping it long-term, but as you know, something can happen. We live in Florida. Hurricanes happen, floods happen, wind damage happens. So I'm like, we need to get that power of attorney. So super important that you had that checklist. And then two, I wanted to add, so when we put the house under contract with the seller, the very first thing we do is get that authorization to release form, because that goes over to the lender so we can start doing our due diligence. And we also, again, get the copy of the note, like you said. And I think what's important to understand about getting the copy of the note is that you want to know what you are obligated to, because you're buying that house and you have now an obligation to pay that mortgage payment. You want to know what you're getting yourself into, because what if the note has a 1-year balloon due next year and you don't know that, or that it can go up, it's a adjustable rate interest. You want to know that too. You want to know how much it's going to go up over the next few years. So the copy of the note is really, really important, because you got to know what you're getting into. I think a lot of investors, when they have an opportunity to buy a house subject to, they get so excited that they can sometimes miss some of these steps. And then later on, you get yourself in trouble. Yep. And then number three, I also wanted to add, we actually have the sellers sign an acknowledgement of subject to, where it actually lists out like 15 different items on what they are signing off on, that they understand that the mortgage is staying in their name, that they understand we are actually not obligated to pay those mortgage payments, but we agree to pay those mortgage payments. And they have to initial each one, because if the seller comes back to you 2 years later and they said, well, I didn't realize that the mortgage was still going to be in my name. Well, now I have the subject to acknowledgement form that they signed at closing.
Awesome. Where did you get that acknowledgement form from?
I don't know, but I can send you a copy of mine.
I have one also. I got it from Bill Bronczek that I did coaching in 2014.
I think I got it from my coach as well.
Yeah, that's a CYA cover your assets for sure form. That is beneficial. Yep, good. So for those of you guys who don't know who Carrie's coach is, that's why you can work with her, right? Or a qualified professional that's been investing probably going on 2 cycles are going to know that. So I think it's really important. There's a lot of newer, very successful investors who've been investing like the last 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, and they have not seen a downturn cycle. And they just do not know what it's like when people are like hemorrhaging, that they need their money or they need to sell the house or they're behind. Like, we haven't really seen that the last 10 years. I would say very fortunate. COVID, I will give the U.S. government a lot of credit. They made adjustments quickly. Like the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac made lending requirements more strict, which is a pain for us as a mortgage professional. It's a pain for you as a consumer. But if you really think about it, it is way better to not like over leverage, or my wife would call it stealing from Peter to pay Paul, right? Like those things are, because those are been done, and we did get PPP money for people that know how to read and follow instructions. We got IDL money that people that know how to read and follow instructions. And like the government didn't make a lot of the changes to help prevent a housing correction thus far. My concern is they're printing so much money so quickly though. And depending on the new president, regardless of if you like him or not, those potential tax laws are going to change. And you're just going to have to adjust to your investment strategies. But normally real estate has been an amazing asset for long-term wealth building.
Yeah, and let's talk about kind of what's going on in the world, what's going on with the government. We have this eviction order that was nationwide, that was ordered by the CDC. Trump advised it. That basically said you can't evict a tenant for non-payment reasons. And I know there was we're not going to go through details on the order, but basically most landlords were not able to evict tenants if the tenant didn't pay the rent, right? And that's been going on now from what I think that started in April. And in some states, I think they've extended it through the end of March 2021. Yeah. And then you've got all these forbearance plans, but it's not every homeowner can go into a forbearance plan, right? There's commercial loans where that can't, you don't have that option. There's things like owner financing, which we do. There's no forbearance plans with owner financing unless we go back to the owner and say, hey, can we work something out? So I want to talk now about what kind of opportunity there is out there, because I think there's a lot of landlords right now that don't want to be landlords any longer. Yeah. I heard a CNN article, an audio recording, and they interviewed a landlord out in California, I think, and he had a couple of properties, and he said, man, after this, I'm done landlording. And my husband goes, you need to contact that guy. That's a tired landlord. And I'm like, I'm sure there's plenty more out there. Trust me.
Right. So here's what I wrote down with that as you shared. One is like government influence. The second one is lending influence. And the third one is professionalism. I'm going to go backwards if that's okay, based on what I heard with you. So a professional landlord, I would say there's 3 types of landlords. Number 1 is an accidental landlord. An accidental landlord is someone that moves for like a job transfer. They inherited a property from a family member. That's an accidental landlord. The second one is a burnt out landlord. They're done. They're just like, they're mentally over it. They're done with the property management company. They're done with the deferred maintenance. They're done with just like, this is just not for me any longer. Number 3 is a professional. Actually, I'm going to add number 4. 3 is a professional. A professional is like Carrie and myself. We kind of eat, sleep, and drink real estate. It's kind of like, it's an addiction. We think that at nights and weekends. Like I was thinking last night, I'm like, oh man, should I shave? Should I not shave? Like, how's the audience? Literally, because I'm like, well, no, I'm not going to shave because this is who I am and this is how I invest. And that's what makes me successful in my market, is I'm not the suit and tie type of guy. In the summer, I always wear shorts. In the winter, wear pants sometimes, but I always wear a collared shirt. I always wear a collared shirt when I'm going to work. I do a lot of speaking engagements. I never dress up in a suit. There have actually been some organizations that are saying, if you don't dress up, we're not going to have you speak. And I'm like, that is totally fine. I'm totally not going to speak. And then like a year later, they're like, can you come and speak? At least wear a collared shirt. I'm like, yeah, I'll wear a collared shirt. So I think that's important of like who your audience is. So as the fourth one though is the newbie. So here's the cool thing. We were all newbies once. We don't know any difference what's right or wrong. We just want it to go so fast and not make any mistakes. And I'm sharing these with you so you can identify, if you're a newbie, which one are you going to become, right? Are you going to become a professional? Are you going to get burned out? Or are you going to become an accidental because you did one deal and you're like, this is too much for me? So I'm going to share a couple of things I think that are really important that you should do before you personally invest in real estate. Number one, you should have 6 months of living expenses saved. If you don't have 6 months of living expenses saved, especially in today's environment, you're going to just burn that money way quick, right? You lose your job, you get sick with COVID, right? Life happens normally. Tony Robbins says life happens for us, not to us. That's just a good sound principles. This morning I was listening to Think and Grow Rich for the third time. And I listened to it last year and again this year, and then I hadn't listened to it since I'm like 23. But oh my gosh, I swear they're talking right now about like what's happening with the pandemic. They're like the families that have 6 months, and they didn't say 6 months of living expenses, but they're like the families that save money, they are doing fantastic. The families that are not saving money, and they're talking about the depression, like those are same principles, right? So number one is having 6 months of living expenses. Number two, this is my personal opinion. Everyone, if you're like, I want to transition into a real estate professional, if you don't like your job, you should get into real estate as a professional full-time. Develop some skills. I don't care if it's becoming a realtor, a mortgage lender, and you don't need to be a lender. You could be a processor, you could be a loan closer, you could be an underwriter. There's a lot of different things. You could go into property management, you could become an insurance agent, you could go into title and escrow, you could become a home inspector. If you're in construction, learn to remodel some houses like with investors that do a lot of volume, and let them teach you why they do what they do, because a lot of contractors will over improve the crap out of their properties because they just don't know. So that's number two. The third thing is you've got to get a mentor and a coach. You can't have just one. A coach is normally someone you're going to pay because you're going to take it serious. So like Carrie and her husband and my wife and I went to a Tony Robbins relationship event in October of 2019. It was freaking amazing. And we paid the equivalent of like an assignment fee to go. But here's the cool thing. The assignment fee investment for our relationships to go stronger is way better than if we get divorced, because if you get divorced, you're separating half of your assets. And not only that, it's hurting your family if you have kids, and more importantly, like your identity with who yourself is, right? So that's important with that. So I think if you think about it, 6 months of living expenses, transition into a real estate career if you don't like what you're doing now. And then the third thing is you've got to get a mentor and a coach. And here's a mentor. A mentor is someone you're going to brainstorm with from time to time, but you're not going to suck energy out of them, because that is not beneficial. I don't do a lot of mentoring. I do more coaching just based on time, and people will take time away from me all day long. But what's important is I have time for myself. I have time for my wife and kids. I find time for my friends. And then obviously I do a lot of work. So I think those are three characteristics that will help you prevent being burned out. Now, let me give a solution real quick on being burned out. If you're burned out, you hire a competent is key, property management company, and they have to own rentals themselves. If they don't own rentals themselves, they are not empathetic to what you're going through. There's a difference. Like, I own a property management company here in Utah. I've got 95 rental properties, right? Like our controller CPA, she owns 4 units, right? Our lead property manager is now in a financial position to have 6 months of living expenses saved, now to go buy one. Our ops manager, who just had a baby and is reevaluating life, we knew, hey, you need to reevaluate life. You literally just had a baby 2 months ago. She's totally down to buy one when she like figures out how to be a mom, right? So like my mortgage employees, 3 of them own rentals. So you're just a lot more empathetic with that. And then if you inherit a property, you got to find the most competent, confident real estate agent in your market to pull comps, walk you through as is value versus ARV. And then if if you guys want to sell it to Carrie, she'll give you a fair price that benefits both of you, because then you can go on to your merry way. But I want to give some different ideas of what you can do. One other comment for newbies: you got to study 30 minutes every day on Audible or reading a book. And my suggestion, awesome podcasts like this. There's a lot of watered down podcasts that it takes like an hour of content, like an hour of information to get 20 minutes of content. And why I've shared, I did 12 podcasts last year for other people. Like I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because it takes so long to get there. So as I'm talking to like Carrie, like what exactly do we want to accomplish so we can make this as engaging as possible for other people? And I think these different tips can help you and even the seasoned investors. I still study every day, 30 minutes. But I think that will really help reduce your curve with hiring a mentor, getting a coach, and then also your own self-development.
Yeah, I love it. And I don't know if you've read Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. Have you read that one too?
I've not read that.
You got to
know what it is.
When you read it, well, he wrote it back, decades ago, and they actually didn't publish it until 2011. They were afraid to publish it because it went against so many traditional views back when he wrote it. But when you read it, you're like, oh my gosh, it's almost as if he was living in today's world. He knew what was going on. Like he was way ahead of his time, Napoleon Hill. And Outwitting the Devil is just such an amazing book to complement Think and Grow Rich.
Awesome. I will listen to it in March.
Cool.
So I'm gonna be accountable to you that I listened to it in March.
Awesome.
Write it down.
I just wanted to mention too, if you have any questions, you can chat in the comments box. So as we're going along, ask your questions. If you're live, you can do it in the comments box. If you're watching this while it's not live, you can still comment on the YouTube page or the Facebook page. Okay, cool. So let's get back to you, Matt. So we went over the 4 kinds of different landlords, and then have 6 months of living expenses saves, get into real estate, some kind of real estate career if you want to get into real estate, and always coach or a mentor. So let's get now into, what did you write down there? You had everything written down that I spoke with before. I forget.
I wrote down so professional lenders and groups. And then let me share a different comment with that. So professional, if you think about this, now what does this have to do with creative financing, seller financing, subject to? Everything. Because the more that you know up front, and you can, so I'm going to share Keith Cunningham, then I'm going to go into lending with this.
Okay.
Keith Cunningham is, and Carrie knows this, Keith Cunningham is Rich Dad from Rich Dad Poor Dad. Him and Kiyosaki were buddies in the 90s. If you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you need to, like, tomorrow. Yes. After you read Think and Grow Rich first. But Cunningham wrote a book called The Road Less Stupid. I've listened to it twice. I've seen him speak 9 times live before. He's a really smart guy. He lost $100 million at the age of 40 in 1990. And that's a lot of money. And he's built it back up. But he shares this quick formula. Number 1, find out what they want. Find out what they want. You guys want to write this down after? Find out what they want. No, number 2, go and get it. Go and get it. He calls it gagi. Go and get it. Number 3, give it to them. Gito, give it to them. So lending, here's the lending piece. Right now, we know what the lending guidelines are because they've been stable for about 7 or 8 months. They have not gotten more strict, and they are stable. So how I'm acting as a mortgage professional, and last year my mortgage team closed $81 million in mortgages just in Utah. So we did a lot of mortgages. If you imagine if you're a real estate team, that's a lot of real estate, right, Carrie? A lot of real estate. So we've got a lot of at-bats helping people. But lending right now, they're asking for you to provide updated profit and loss statements for you to be able to get qualified for a mortgage. And a lot of people are like, we don't even know how to do that, that are self-employed. So if you think about that, is you understand what the seller's perspective is, then you'll be able to solve their problems better, right? So like as you get to know who the seller is and what their financial hardship, or you buy the property from like a normal person that just is relocating for work, they get transferred, new job opportunity, etc. The more you can understand or be empathetic of where they're coming from, then you can solve that option. So with lending, you don't need to be a mortgage lender to become amazing at creative seller financing subject to, but it's good for you to understand a couple things. And here's the three. Number one is what's your debt to income ratio. Your debt to income ratio is your gross income divided by your monthly expenses that shows up on credit, or you are legally obligated to pay, like child support or alimony. That's number one. Number two, what is your loan to value? The loan to value is your current market value divided by your liens on the properties. Lien could be a first mortgage, a second mortgage, or a home equity line of credit, and very popular in Utah, solar panels. So you need to understand what is on title, because if they have a first mortgage, a second mortgage, and solar panels, you might not want to buy that property depending on what your cash flow goals are, or if you're going to flip the property. Number three, residual income. Residual income is required for VA loans. VA loan stands for Veterans Administration. Carrie, did you serve in the military by chance?
No.
No, I didn't think so, but I just wanted to ask. Me neither. Okay, I've helped a lot of veterans on a national basis. One thing that's amazing with VA loans, they have a very, very, very low foreclosure rate. Yeah. Because they actually calculate these different things. So if you understand debt to income ratio, gross income divided by monthly expenses, loan to value, your first mortgage, second mortgage, and solar panels, or your pool in Florida, divided by your value. And number three, what's disposable income? That's the importance of budgeting. Last part, government. So with the PPP money, now round two, I'll share this personally. I got a PPP loan. Did you happen to get a PPP loan, Carrie, also?
Yes, we did.
Have you gotten confirmation that yours is forgiven yet? I got a confirmation mine's forgiven.
We're still working on it, but it's coming.
Yeah. So that's the cool thing is I was talking to a real estate investor yesterday that is in a cash flow crunch. And he's like, I didn't apply for the PPP loan because I did not want to have to pay it back. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, if you got the loan and you had to pay it back, isn't that better that you have to pay it back at a really low interest rate versus not having the loan? He's like, yeah, I didn't think about that. I'm like, you're freaking stupid, right? Like, if you be responsible, because he's in a very, very, very tight situation financially. So government, here's my opinion, regardless if I am pro-America and pro who works for me. So that's going to be different at every space, right? I'm super concerned, optimistically, that the rules could change to possibly be not as advantageous for real estate professionals. Now, for a lot of you guys on here who might be newer and are not real estate professionals, I could understand that you're like, well, I need some policy that's going to be better for me. And you have to think about the long play, right? Like, what decisions we make now are going to compound in the future. And who we hang out with now is going to make a difference of who we hang out with in the future, right? And a cool thing with Carrie, meeting her and her husband in Hawaii, and the amazing thing of social media, as she just shares information, like, I'm an engaging person. I ask a lot of questions. I'm not just like, as we ask questions, I would start like, they're all real estate related. And then we like connected more. And then we're like, oh, this makes sense for us to have a synergetic relationship Q1 of this year. I think that you got to think of, like, based on the current laws, how can I utilize it to our benefit? Like, that's pro-capitalism, if you guys want to write that down, right? Regardless of what the laws are, how can you utilize that to your benefit? And I think right now, buying with creative financing or subject to is a fantastic way, because you can solve a lot of problems for sellers that are in a hardship.
Yeah, and if I can just add to what you were saying with the three things that you listed there, the debt to income, the LTV, and the residual income is what you need to think about when you're getting a loan. Here's what I love about subject to. Doesn't matter what your debt to income is when you're buying houses subject to. Doesn't matter what the LTV is when you're buying houses subject to. Doesn't matter what your residual income is when you're buying houses subject to. Because guess what, guys? That loan has already been taken out, and that loan was taken out in the seller's name. They have already qualified for the loan. The loan has already originated. You are not assuming that loan, which means the loan is not transferring over to you. It is staying in the seller's name. So number one, you don't have to qualify for that loan. So why would you not leverage that loan that's already in place? Number two, you don't have to go raise the money. If I have $100,000 loan in place that originated in the seller's name, and they're willing to keep that loan in their name, and I buy this house subject to the existing mortgage, I don't have to qualify for that. And I don't have to go raise it, right? I don't have to go to my private lenders and raise the 100,000. It's already there. And typically these are going to be traditional bank loans that have much favorable terms on them than I can get with a private loan or a hard money loan. So these things that Matt's talking about, you got to keep them in mind when you're taking out the loan. But I'm glad you brought this up, Matt, because that's why I love subject to is you don't have to have that when you're buying houses subject to, which means you can buy as many houses as you want. You said, Matt, you got up to 10 loans and then you couldn't take out any more loans. That's the restrictions you have when you're going to go get bank loans. You can only get so many. Doesn't matter how rich you are, wealthy you are, how much income you have, how low your debt to income is. There is a restriction on how many traditional loans you can get. But there's not a restriction on how many houses you can buy subject to a traditional loan. So thank you for bringing those three things up. And now I want to really talk about what are the opportunities moving forward for subject to, and why do we want to focus on subject to for year 2020? And let's talk about this because you might have a different opinion than I do. Why do we may want to or may not want to focus on subject to for 2021?
Right. So great comment. The reason I shared those three things with financing is you're absolutely right. Like, just so you guys know, we actually scripted this out like 6 months ago and we've been role playing. So we're just that fluid and seems natural. That's the nice thing when you have two professionals, investors sharing to help you guys out. So a couple of things that I think is important. One is I'm going to call it creative financing, right? Creative financing in and of itself, you could study it for years.
Yes.
More than 50 of my properties that I own were all bought with seller financing or subject to or all-inclusive deeds of trust or notes and deeds. And here's what I did. I found out what the seller wanted. I went and got it and I gave it to him, right? Literally what Keith Cunningham just shared. So the ones I've bought with all-inclusive deeds of trust is because they didn't feel comfortable with the subject to. The ones that had a note and deed of trust, that means they own the property free and clear and they want monthly cash flow, right? And the ones that are subject to, they were totally fine to check up on the boxes, go on their merry way. So I think a couple things. One, I think you need to have at least like whatever your initial investment is. So here's a quick example. If you invest $25,000 just for fun, $25,000 up front to buy a property subject to, let's pretend that it was brought to you a realtor and you paid and let's say the purchase price was $150,000. Okay. So the underlying balance will be $125,000. And let's say it's at a 4% interest rate and their payment is $800 a month. Mm-hmm. And let's say it's a 4-bed, 2-bath house and it can rent for $1,100 a month. In your market, how much is we'll call it a C-class area, Carrie, how much does a 4-bedroom, 2-bath built in the 60s rent for in your market? Just curious.
In like a C neighborhood, probably.
C neighborhood.
Yeah, probably about like $1,000, $1,100.
Okay, cool. What about a B neighborhood?
Probably about 14 to 1,500.
Okay, cool. So in our C neighborhood, 4-bedroom, 2-bath is $1,600. Okay. So we're just going to pick examples wherever you are in the country. Some of you guys might be like, I live in California. This is like totally unrealistic. It's not unrealistic because you can buy properties in other parts of the country. Now, if you're going to Indianapolis or Ohio or somewhere out there, there's still properties under 100, which I think is crazy, but you got to be conscientious of where that market is, right? So if you buy this property for $25,000 out of pocket, this is going to pay the realtors because they got to get paid, and they should get paid, right? Bringing you the deal. Let's say the realtors get $10,000, the seller gets $10,000, and the $5,000 goes for closing costs, etc. So, and let's say it's in rentable condition. All you got to do is clean the carpets, clean it, and you just go on your way because you're not trying to push your ARV. So if you cash flow $300 a month, So we're going to grab this. $300 a month times 12 is $3,600. What is your cash on cash return of the 25,000? Quick math, right? You take a zero off, that's 10%. You add it, you're probably 15 or 16%, right? Well, here's what a lot of people don't take into consideration: vacancies, deferred maintenance, and property management. This is the difference between the professional and the burned out. They get all excited, and this is where the newbie comes in line. They get all excited. Holy cow, I'm only out of pocket $25,000. I'm going to kill it, right? And then they're like, oh, it hasn't been rented for 3 months. Or I forgot about the furnace and it went out, right? So that's what you need to take into consideration. So here's comment number one. Establish your ROI that you want to make on your money, right? Yep. Establish an ROI that you want to make in your money. Peter Fortunato would say is you take 40% off the top, and that's what your actual net is, minus whatever your payments are, right? I've heard him tons of times say that. Every market's going to be a little different, but that guy is in his early 70s and has been investing legitimately over 50 years. So I think he has a lot of wisdom, and he's very frugal in a good way, right? Number two, what is your long-term goals? So I'll share this exercise with Carrie as an example. And then number three, does this property assist my long-term goals? So for example, a lot of savvy financial planners, we learned this at Tony Robbins' financial event. I've learned this also at Wealth Mastery. If you take your current income, gross income times 25, that's how much you'll need to have for financial freedom, earning a 5% rate of return. So I'm going to say that one more time. If you take your gross income times 25, that's how much you'll need for financial freedom based on the lifestyle that you're living right now, right? So if you're living like high on the horse, that you have barn store doors in the background, you got a globe on the top right-hand corner of your desk, and you have an amazing microphone like Carrie does, well, she might need a little bit more, right? I was just making fun of what I have not in my background. But if you think about it, most of us want to progress our life and live better, or at least maintain and improve, right? Now we got to take into consideration cost of living, healthcare, taxes, different things like that. So let's go back to creative financing right now, how this is applicable. Your seller is probably not worried about those things right now. They're worried about, I can't make my mortgage payment. I need money for food. I got to relocate to another state. Unfortunately, we have healthcare challenges, but I want you to think of what your reason that you're buying that property. The second comment, always plan on a 10-year play. You got to plan on holding that property for 10 years, because if we're at our peak, this is my personal opinion, I feel like we're at the crest. Yeah. And I felt like we were at the crest for like 5 freaking years, and I'm wrong.
Me too.
But I'm okay that I'm wrong. I've been making decisions.
Yep.
That if it goes down, that I have more capital. So all I'm doing is I'm selling, getting capital, reinvesting, selling, getting capital, reinvesting. So for you, for example, guys and girls, like here's a simple amortization. Take your assets, do a 3% compound interest in the next 10 years, and it'll tell you what the future balance is. And then on the subject two that you bought for $125,000, let's assume they've already been in their mortgage for 5 years, so they only have 25 years left. That will start going down. That when you get to your 10th year, which is the 15th year of the amortization, you're gonna have a ton of equity. And then you sell their property, you take the cash out. Like I just sold the property last year. We're gonna put a pool in our house. The pool costs like $150, like the cost of this house. I personally would rather go buy 5 more subject twos. But for our family and relationships and experiences, I've been saving up for a long time to put the pool in. That's the cool thing. How often could you put 25,000 and then in 10 years later, you'll probably net 100? Like that's not a normal thing. And that's what's amazing about real estate investing. So if you can identify what your long-term goals are, if it hits your current ROI, it hits your long-term. And if this property, let's say it's a break-even property, and let's say your own personal debt-to-income ratio is like 40%, it's probably not good for you to take this property yourself. This is where you would assign it. You'd call Carrie, say, Carrie, I got this property. Here are the numbers. It's a break even with cash flow. Carrie might say, that doesn't work for me, but that might work for someone else. Can we work with it together? That might be an amazing property for someone to buy, like in a self-directed IRA. Yeah. Or a self-directed 401k, which we're not focusing on today. But that's a great way that someone's got $10,000, $25,000. They have these numbers. They're going to hold on to it for 10 years. They sell that asset, and then they're going to defer or not pay taxes on it. That would be a completely different podcast to share. But there's a lot of amazing ways to buy and control real estate.
Cool. Yeah. And I wanted to add to what you say, what you're saying. So when I think of when I'm going into a subject to transaction, I'm always thinking of two things: equity pay down and cash flow. So it's got to have one or the other. Now, if it has both, that's great. And you can share how, your thoughts on this, Matt, too. And I think we were talking about this, that a lot of subject to transactions aren't necessarily high cash flow. They can be, but a lot of times with like our subject to transactions, we're only making $200, $300, $400 a month on them. But I decided to do a subject to transaction with them because it was so far into the mortgage. There was so much equity there that I was willing to give up cash flow for equity, knowing that, yeah, I'm still cash flowing it a little bit. But in 5 to 7 years from now, I can sell this and there's going to be equity there because it was so far into the mortgage. And then we've also done deals where it wasn't very far into the mortgage, but we were cash flowing it. And so I had a long-term game plan. Okay, if I got to hold on to this for 10 years, that's fine because there's not a lot of cash, there's not a lot of equity in it. And if the market goes down, well, then the equity's definitely not going to be there, but there's cash flow. So I'm always weighing cash flow with equity on these subject to transactions. How about you?
Yeah, great question. So definitely those two. I wrote down a couple that you just reminded me. One is tax advantages.
Yes.
A lot of people need the depreciation. A lot of people need the expenses. For those of the guys that are transitioning into real estate professionals, the goal is to make as much money and to keep as much as you can. If you guys want to write that down, that's the goal, to make and keep as much as possible. And that's based on tax efficiency. That you don't really start figuring that out until you start paying bigger checks to the IRS. And a big check's relative. Could be your first 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, or 100, or 200, or whatever. Then you're like, oh man, I gotta plan better, right? The second thing is long-term wealth building. There's a website called OFHEO. I'll send this to Carrie after. That I monitor national appreciation every quarter. It takes me like literally 15 minutes because I've been studying it for 12 years. When I started doing mortgages nationally, actually in 2006, this website was still available, and I just started monitoring what's happening in the market. Now we'll pick Florida real quick. If you have a condo tell, if you have a condo tell in Tampa, St. Pete, those got hammered and barely came back like 3 or 4 years ago based on my friends that live in that market. So you do need to take into consideration what type of investment you're going to buy.
Yep.
There's a lady named Robin Thompson. Do you know who Robin Thompson is by chance, Carrie?
Yeah, I do. She's in my market.
She is the queen of rehab. All right. So I saw her speak, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago in Arizona. I was on vacation, and this is like, I want to go to a seminar. I went to the local RIA there, and she was ironically speaking on Saturday. And I was like, oh my gosh, this lady is amazing, because she was sharing strategies that no one in my market in Utah knew. And I actually had her come to Utah the following year, and she like knocked it out of the ballpark because she just had different fundamentals. But I think this is personally, I like buying 4-bedroom, 2-bath rentals because you have less of a turnover normally, and they're normally in better areas. Not always, but better sometimes. I stick away from the 2-bedroom, 1-baths because it can only go up in value. So I think there's different things with that. So equity pay down, cash flow, tax deduction, long-term wealth building, those are different items that help you. And here's a cool one. When your rentals pay for your assets, then you're really making it. So like I taught a class on Saturday. I teach just 3 classes a year, and it was a planning class. It's called Blueprint. And after the class, there was a realtor driving a super nice Mercedes. She's like, thank you so much for the class. I'm like, I really like your Mercedes. Would you like to learn how your rentals can pay for it? She's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know how. I'm like, I have a 5 Series BMW. My car thing is I like stuff to get paid by assets. So like I'm not paying that car payment out of my pocket. I could pay cash. I'd rather earn more money with my money called arbitrage. But I'm like, hey, would you like to learn how to have your cars getting paid by your rentals? She's like, I don't even know you could do that. So that's the cool thing, is taking a step higher is your assets can get paid, or your toys can get paid by your long-term growth.
Yeah. And that's really the whole message behind the Millionaire Next Door book, right? Is that you're not going out and taking all your cash and spending it on toys. Your cash is paying for toys.
Yep.
And sometimes it takes a while to get to that point where you're growing and you're growing and you're growing. You might have to drive around a crappy car for a little while because you're disciplined with the cash that you're making. You're constantly reinvesting it until all of a sudden you've got more cash coming in than what's going out. And now that's where your cash flow is now paying for your toys.
Right.
Love it.
So quick comment back to the Millionaire Next Door. If you remember, I shared how I bought a motorcycle and a BMW, and then I read the book. So I actually kept that BMW for 10 years after reading the book. So I bought it in 2003, and I didn't sell it till 2013, and it had over 200,000 miles. And if you guys have ever German cars, they're damn expensive. And I actually looked at my numbers the previous year, and I was like, my gosh, my maintenance is the same as a $700 payment. I'm out. And then I bought a 1-year-old one, and then I financed it with my rentals. So that's when I started doing that. So so those are just different tips that you guys can learn. But with subject 2, you got to remember who your seller is, right? So I'm very empathetic that I know where different people are coming from, and I want to solve a mutually beneficial relationship for both of them. A lot of times people call it win-win, but literally, if you literally find out what they want, go and get it and give it to them, you're going to always be successful. And if for some reason it doesn't work, take it as a learning experience and you on to the next opportunity.
Yeah. Wow. I have a whole page of notes here. This was awesome. Guys, I just think that subject to excellent strategy for 2021, there are a lot of landlords out there right now that are not going to want to be landlords moving forward. And what Matt said, find out what they want, go and get it and give it to them. And subject to could be just one of those strategies that you can use over and over again to purchase properties for 2021. So awesome. Thanks, Matt. Where can everyone get a hold of you if they want to connect with you?
More questions. So because I'm over 40 and I'm under 35, I'm not on Instagram. I wrote down Q1 because I'm on social media more than I should. But Facebook, Matt Atkinson, if you, that's one way. Also, my real estate consulting company in Utah is called MJA Real Consulting right here. MJA Real Consulting. I'm a real person. We like that. So I think those are the best ways for us to help just connectively. And the last thing I wanted to share is, this is a Peter Fortunato. So I wish that I made up the Keith Cunningham 3 questions because that was him, but this is a Peter Fortunato one. He says, the first 10 years as a real estate investor, you're a starter. You're all over the place. You don't know if you want to do assignments, fix and flips, land syndication, apartments, wholesaling, getting a license, not getting a license, land development, tax lien sales, etc. Now, after you've done that for 10 years, you're considered a builder. Builders have 2 sources of revenue that they focus on with cash flow. One is notes, so they lend money as a profession, or the second one is rentals. Doesn't matter if it's commercial, residential, mobile home parks, etc. That's a 20-year play. So first 10 years starter, years 11 through 30 is a builder. Then you're considered an ender. That's years 31 through 40. You have 2 concerns. One, preserving capital. You don't want to lose your principal. Number 2 is tax efficiency. When I learned that in 2016, holy cow, 5 years ago, I literally course corrected my investment strategy, and I'm a lot more conscientious of how to build my cash flow so I pay less tax now. So hopefully those tips will help you guys out, condense your learning curve to get the results you're looking for this year.
Yeah, and great perspective too, Matt, because I think it's Tony Robbins who probably borrowed it from a lot of successful other business people says that most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a lifetime. And what you just said is you might not get to the end. It might take you 30 years, right, to get to that point. You're still in a starter mode in the first 10 years. I think a lot of people get into real estate investing, think it's a get rich quick overnight kind of thing. And it's not. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so I think that's just great perspective, what you just gave. So thank you for that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Cool. And you said you had a free class coming up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I teach a free class the first Tuesday of the month from 7 to 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. The reason I like sharing them free is literally, have you ever gone to Business Mastery before?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, cool. So I got this idea after Business Mastery last year in January, and I was just like, I need to get better with technology. There's a better space to help people out. So I decided to start teaching classes once a month for free. And then that got shut down in a month. So then locally, right, I would teach them locally because I'd rather teach 50 to 80 people versus like having 50 to 80 1-hour phone calls about the same thing. So it's on February 2nd, and it says it's February 2nd, and it's 5 ways to buy properties not on the MLS. So we're going to be focusing on different ways to buy properties not on the multiple listing service. And I'm going to be honest with you. I only teach what I do myself. Like I don't send out mailers or I don't do bandit signs, but those are obviously strategies that work. I don't do PPC, but I'm going to share 5 strategies that we do, how to buy properties not on the multiple listing service, because we're still buying from whoever we can find properties from.
Okay. Do you have a URL or where can they go to register for that?
Yeah, they can go to mjarealconsulting.com, and they can click on the link and register. It's a Zoom meeting. mjarealconsulting.com. So yeah, we teach these every single month, and you guys are more than welcome to participate and learn. And I appreciate you letting me share today.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. I hope you all learned a lot. Thank you so much, Matt, for coming on and sharing all your experience and expertise.
Yes. Last question for you, Carrie. What was your top takeaway or breakthrough or aha?
Oh, that's a great question. So what's my top takeaway from today's conversation?
Yes, please.
I love the Keith Cunningham 1, 2, 3, find out what they want, go and get it and give it to them. What I love about Keith Cunningham is that he simplifies everything. He does not like to overcomplicate things. Those 3 things I can remember every time I go in to talk to a seller without overcomplicating it. Find out what they want, go and get it and give it to them. So I love it.
Cool. Awesome. And one thing I learned from you, I want to share is you did an outstanding job being able to I thought this was the most fluid podcast I've done, not just all year because this is the first one, but in the last 12 months. So you've done an amazing platform to share with other individuals that they can watch it. And you definitely know your stuff because the things I might not have said, you added to or vice versa. So outstanding job of your expertise to share.
Thank you. It helps to have rock stars on here like you, Matt. So thank you so much again for coming on. We're going to have you again on later this year when we see what plays out this year, see what we did.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
So make sure you follow Matt on social media. Go ahead and register for his free event, 5 ways to buy properties, not on the MLS. All right. We'll see you guys soon. Take care. See you on the next one.
Okay. Bye-bye.